I need to bring in my guests because there is so much to talk about. We're joined with Arnaud Develay. He is an author, political analyst, and international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and a Fracturing of the American Political Consensus. Arnaud, man, you have my deepest apologies for yesterday. Thank you for coming on today. How are you doing today? You doing okay?
Yes, thank you, Jamal. I'm doing fine. How are you
Good.
doing? That's the question.
Bit banged up. My hair's all scratched up. My body hurts. Apparently, I landed somehow on my side, and it's like at night. What sucks is as you're laying there, it just aches. It just aches all night. It just aches and throbs. But I'm okay. I'm here. I'm doing the news. So it's fine. You are the person I wanted to talk to because there's so much going on. Now, let's start here. There seems to be two tracks of negotiations that are taking place simultaneously. In one track, it's the war, and the other track, it's business relationship and reestablishing those relationships. And correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm saying anything that you think is off, tell me. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is from TASS. U.S. Russian consultations kick off in Istanbul. Russia's delegation is led by Moscow's ambassador to Washington, Alexander Darchiev. Now, this was forecasted when Dmitry Krylev was here last week. And so we have continued those negotiations. Explain how this works. And do you think, let me ask you this way, what do you think the success is going to be of the negotiations on the track of resuming diplomatic relations while the war continues? And not just continues, Moscow seems to be on an offensive. I mean, Kiev is being pushed back effectively on all fronts. So, how does this work that there are two tracks of negotiations? And do you think one track, at the very least, is going to be successful, even if the other track is not?
Well, to begin to understand or to answer your question, I guess one has to take into account the players themselves. I mean, it's unfathomable in this day and age to have the United States and the Russian Federation be at loggerhead to a point where there is absolutely no communication, even at the diplomatic level. And so for as far as we can say today, 3 years, this had been 3 years of
Yeah.
non-communication. So when you take into account the United States as the still to this day somewhat preeminent power, some would say on the wane, but there's still some water to go under the bridge before this is said,
Mhm.
and the Russian Federation, a country which has only a 17% debt to GDP ratio, one-sixth of the world landmass, uh, sitting on a pile of natural resources, which at some point we can imagine, we can optimistically say, reasonably say, it will need to engage in joint ventures to help develop this huge supply, this huge swath of land east of the Ural Mountain. This makes no sense on the long term.
Mhm.
Uh, you can only explain it away as far as small-minded federal bureaucrats who somehow have tried to parlay their own personal, if not family, issues into U.S. foreign policy. This is what we've seen in as far as Western and more specifically U.S. foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia the last 10 years. So they gave it a shot and it failed. It failed, and not only did it fail, but the boomerang effect has been of such magnitude that it has led to a complete retooling of US foreign policy in Europe and on other matters. I guess we'll discuss it later on, bearing on commercial and trade issues. Uh, so What we're seeing right now is a long, which is inversely proportional to the complete absence of contact and relationship between the two countries. What we're seeing is a long, painstakingly slow but necessary process aimed at realigning a decent bilateral relationship. Like,
Hmm.
for instance, today we just heard out of I guess I don't know if it's still ongoing, the meeting in Istanbul, but
Right.
one of the first takeaway from those discussions was the resumption of direct flights between Moscow and Washington. Well, that's very significant. If anything, owing to the potential for business relationships to be resumed. You can't imagine a second uh, heads of companies and CEOs having to, go do a big detour to go to Moscow in order to discuss joint ventures. That's completely, unfathomable.
Hmm.
But this is where we are right now, discussing minute issues, which all put together one after the other will, and into this equation, I'm also adding all the retooling of diplomatic teams, in both countries. Uh, so we have the tools to resume now, start talking about the substantive issue. It would seem completely uh, surreal and not credible to begin talking about such an important file as the Ukraine file if there was not even the modicum of required mechanism to do so in a proper environment, should I say. Uh, so that's the way I kind of look at it as far as uh, the two track question that you asked. Also, there are confidence building measures. We just learned today. I will be talking about it later on another program tonight. There was the announcement of another swap
Right.
between Russian and American prisoners. So it is what it is, but it's only the reflection again of a drastically misguided policy that has been unfortunately carried out the last 3 years. Some would say probably going back to 2014, but the last 3 years were really the apex of the deterioration of the bilateral relation. Not to mention all the intangibles, meaning the loss of credibility, the loss of confidence, and so you know how it is. I mean, trust takes a long time to build, and it can be snapped overnight. So this is also a factor to take into account.
Hmm.
So also try to through this resumption of communication among experts, uh, we saw also. I mean, you know, some say that sports also plays a big role in diplomacy. As an incidental story to what we're talking about. A few days ago, the long-held record of the NHL amount of goals scored in a career, which
Yep.
was held by the great one,
Wayne
Wayne
Gretzky.
Gretzky, uh, well, eventually was broken by a Russian player. If you look at the coverage that this received in the United States, it's also another indicator. President Trump even made an allusion to it. He didn't remember the name of the player, the hockey player, but he made a mention of it. So those are little signs, not unlike what we saw in the 1970s with the ping pong diplomacy involving the rapprochement between the US and China in an attempt to somehow counter Soviet hegemony or perceived hegemony at the time. But this is what it is. It's kind of a slight, at this point, it's still a slight change in the atmosphere, in temperature. And the idea, I guess, of this two-track again negotiation is uh, allude to Ukraine whenever you can on very specific issues, specific point, i.e., the constant violation by Ukraine of the
Ceasefire.
ceasefire bearing on the bombardment of energy facilities, but not make it too much of an issue that it would come and be a stumbling block. to the resumption of the bilateral relation, which the world needs. It's actually, if we talk about public policy here, and the world is the public, it is good for the world that Russia and the US are able to discuss a whole range of issues. So
Now,
you have to
I,
understand it like this.
no, that's perfectly fine. Alexander Macurus had a hypothesis. And what he is postulating is that Trump is working with the Russians and working with them in a way where they're going around Europe. So for things like the Black Sea grain deal, or let's say the Black Sea Initiative, resumption or around sanctions, and in doing so, would effectively peel away elements of Europe. Like Maloney in Italy has already said, we need to align ourselves with the United States. We need to work with the US. And so, I think it was Fico, either Orban or Fico, pointed out there are other European leaders that are also talking to Putin. Many of the businesses want to get back into Russia, especially if they want to get their hands on Russian gas. And if the United States is normalizing diplomatic ties with Russia, it's going to put more pressure on Europe to effectively do the same, considering they're hurting without Russian fuel, Russian energy, and now a trade war. Give me your take on that. Do you think that's true? That for all intents and purposes, the business track, because you got to give Putin credit on this. The guy that he sent to the US was a business guy. And the business guy was speaking the language of business. And you can imagine Trump perked up. Oh, business. I can make money. I can make profit. And so he sent somebody who he knew would be very popular in regards to what he was going to say in the language that he was going to effectively speak. And then all of a sudden you have additional meetings taking place very next week. Like, do you think that this is putting pressure on Europe to, let's say, back down from some of their sanctions, or putting pressure on Europe in some level to normalize relationships, especially if the US is going to try to go around Europe on some of the sanctions that Europe has passed?
Well, it's an interesting way to actually put it. Up until the second election of Donald Trump, there was not even a sliver of light between Europe and the US,
Yeah,
as far as the economic policy, the worldview, the complete demonization process deployed against sovereign countries as such, or countries which, if they are capitalistic in nature, do not allow the sacrosanct market to overrule the verticality of power. What I mean by that is that in countries like China and Russian Federation, communism, to be sure, is a thing of the past. I mean, we talk about the Communist Party in China, but it's only communist by name. Like
right.
Deng Xiaoping used to say when confronted with someone who asked him this question, of ideological purity, replied, "What difference does it make whether the cat is black or white as long as it catches mice?" Which is a very Chinese way of putting it, but it's all about pragmatism. But the idea is that for those neoliberal to the core, post-national elites in the West, all the way until the Trump administration was invested, again, there was this kind of unity of purpose, and it became, a defining feature of how they related to the rest of the world, including the global South. Now, with the Trump administration, we have not just an alternance in power in Washington. I mean, whether it's a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, by and large, this was never a defining factor in what we're seeing now in the divide between Washington and Brussels. But Trump is not just any kind of Republican. He's someone who's actually is a heretic. Is it's like the old pharaoh Akhenaton, who decided to move the capital city from Memphis to I don't know, I don't remember the name of the city, but he moved it to from Memphis to Akhenopolis or something like this.
Yeah.
it didn't last long. I mean, his reign lasted, just a few years, but he completely got rid of all the pantheons of gods and elevated the sun as the one and only deity. And at the time, I mean, those people in Memphis, they were like, "This is crazy," you
Yeah,
know.
right, right.
So I guess this is
Money,
kind of what we're
principles, not
seeing
dead.
here.
Yeah.
Trump is the heretic pharaoh in the Western circles, and to the extent we're witnessing such resistance to his attempt to mend fences and bring somewhat the conflict in Ukraine to a close, is the fact that those people think he's not going to be around that long.
Mhm.
I mean, right now the tactic is to try to hang tough until the midterms, hoping that that is, their fellow travelers in philosophy in the
Wait.
US, will be able to wrestle some of those institutional levers, such as Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Uh, Bearing in mind that as far as the judicial branch is concerned, they are pretty stocked. They have what it takes there. So that's where they stand right now. That's why they're putting on the brakes on every initiative, because they don't want to lose ground. They want to try to maintain the current arrangements as they are, with the idea that this guy won't be along, very long. We'll get
Mhm.
rid of him, and by the time we wrestle control back from him of Congress, we'll initiate impeachment. We'll prevent him from basically focusing on substantive policies. So that's I think this explains a lot as to why Europe is definitely not playing along. They are probably being egged on by some of their U.S. fellow travelers who have refocused their efforts in Brussels to try to provide a sense of go ahead, keep doing things as you were doing it. Don't deviate. We'll handle this guy. It's just like about 17 months left until and well, I mean, I'm sorry to say that might actually be the case if the tariff policy
Yeah.
creates this. Yes, I mean, they're going to be running on maybe a recession by the time we get to the midterm, to
Yeah.
November 2026. So
Stagflation. It might even be
stagflation.
stagflation. Yeah. It might
There you
even be that
go.
bad.
So so
Yeah.
it's I'm somewhat sorry to say it, but it's a credible approach to short-term politics, as far as considering Donald Trump as just a bump on the road to them.
Wow. Yeah. They might just wait him out. And especially if he destroys his presidency with the tariff thing. I have to piggyback this on something else. Because even though it's two tracks, I'm wondering if these two tracks are merging at a certain point. Now, the Telegraph has pointed out that Trump is going to effectively give Zelensky an ultimatum, effectively giving Putin everything he wants. It's like you want this, with the exception of, you want the territories, they're yours, no NATO for Ukraine, etc. And that Zelensky either accepts it or Trump walks. Now, I want to piggyback that with this. So, this story came out of Politico, where the US is pulling out from a hub that was instrumental in providing arms for Ukraine. Now, apparently, the operations are supposedly handed over to Poland and some of the other countries. But it's pretty wild that this was something that the US was doing for years. It's like 95% of the weapons that go to Ukraine go through this hub. And Trump is like, too expensive, got to pull out. And I'm wondering if the Telegraph might be right, that this is effectively foreshadowing Trump getting to the point of saying, all right, this is over. We need to go and attack China. But this is done. Europe, have at it, knowing full well that Europe can't do it.
Yes, I guess it's a encouraging sign, but let's not be too over optimistic here. I mean,
Fair enough.
the
Fair enough.
U.S. might have removed their physical presence there in terms of the manning operational staff, but the money still flows in, and the weapons are still flowing in.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the idea when you re-engage with the Russians from the U.S. viewpoint, I would surmise, is to try to at least do away with the sticking edges, so that you don't antagonize, or you don't somehow uh, get found out as someone who's still pretty much, if we go by what the New York Times revealed a week ago, 1 degree of separation at war with the Russian Federation. I mean, they were on the ground
Yeah.
basically telling the Ukrainians, go take that hill, go take that trench, wait out in this area until this other group. And, I mean, it's not just providing intelligence from satellites here to launch those ATACMS missiles. So it is in a way, yes, somewhat of a slight change, qualitative change, but we're not at the level yet where we can say, the US is washing their hands off it.
Yeah.
So some might say it could be, it's almost like what we've heard about the 10,000 US troops being pulled out of Poland to be redeployed elsewhere. You know, it's tit for tat. Try to throw a bone to people, in Moscow. We need to somehow also look to the more hardcore section of their political spectrum and say, no. I mean, look, the U.S. It might be subtle at this point, but there's a change in the air.
Mhm.
But again, it's
Slight. It's
yeah,
minor.
very slight, very
Yeah.
slight, very slight. I mean, you're the president of the United States. You call the shots. I mean, this is what he keeps on saying. I'm the final authority here. What I say goes. So what prevents you from just turning off the spigot? I mean,
That's
if anything, do a moratorium on it, for 3 months. And then you'll see what, Europe can do on its own. But as long as you provide a flow of weapon, intelligence, and monies, you are sustaining this conflict.
mhm.
I mean, just assume your policy. That's what I don't understand. Now, I understand that he has people around him, very powerful actors, corporations, and military industrial complex who are still making a loot out of this whole thing, and he has to keep that in mind. But at some point, you gotta step in. I mean, it's your presidency, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's just a matter of packaging it in a way that you can have your own minions go on cable news networks 24/7 and hammer out the points that you want the public to perceive. The public is behind you anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
So,
I
so
it's
what's the catch here?
I oh man. I guess I looked at it as he has to work between the lines. And he has to, and look, I'm not defending Trump on this. I agree with you. Walk away hard. Like Steve Bannon said, just call it a day. Um, but I'm telling you, if he does, they're going to say this is not a deal. Not just not a deal. Ukraine was winning up to the point where Trump pulled out, even though they're clearly losing on all fronts. Like the spin on this would be tremendous. And so I don't know if in his mind it's like, I need to maneuver this in a way where I'm getting closer relationship with Russia. I'm going to put Zelensky in a pinch where I can effectively blame it on Zelensky. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I agree with your take though. Walk away. You're the president.
But right now, the problem is Zelensky. And so, to the extent you keep providing Zelensky the means to keep acting the way he does, which objectively is ungrateful and disrespectful, almost,
By the
entitled.
way, he's asking for more money. He's asking for more
Well,
money.
there you go.
So
The
he's
guy,
like,
I mean, he has no incentive
yeah.
whatsoever.
He said he found two Chinese people, which is so racist, right? Because Russia is such a big country. They're going to be people who look Asian. He's like, we found two Chinese people, and now we need the U.S. to give us more money. Missing the fact that Trump is saying you already owe us $300 billion. I
Well,
just
actually, on this particular point, well, two things. The first thing is when he uploaded the clip he forgot to change the label on it, so it showed Korean. But then we know there are no North Koreans in on the line of contact. So he's actually using two false narratives, trying to upgrade the first one, which was the North Koreans are engaged in the conflict, with something to top it all off in order to get more monies, as you say, saying the Chinese are now there. So this whole thing is ridiculous on its face. I mean, Russia is about to record the mobilization of 160,000 conscription staff. I mean, they're not going to be their regular, conscripts.
Mhm.
They're not going to be automatically sent on the front line, but they will provide huge relief to those who are, for the time being, manning some of those installations,
Yeah.
and provide free a lot of personnel who might then be deployed, on the front line. So uh, every commentators and observer of the conflict uh, shares the consensus that we are looking at a major escalation on the front,
Yeah.
probably sometime in May, once the thawing is complete. So this actually might, I would say, delve into what you were saying as far as Trump telling or sending signals to Putin, do your thing, and take this guy out of his misery. But
Yeah.
if that's the case, so then yeah, I guess it would make sense. You can provide funding, but to the extent that Ukrainians don't know what to do because they're basically still 50% of it, that if they knew how to operate the different weapon system we've sent them in a coordinated way, we would have known about it for a long time now. That's not the case. And so it doesn't really matter whether I keep providing equipment and on the ground. It will get burned. It will get burned
Mhm.
by Russian missiles. But I don't know to the extent he's talking about human lives. That's what I don't understand. I mean, because the rounding up of
Yeah. It is
Ukraine,
mind-boggling.
it's crazy. I mean, we had the current chief of staff of Ukraine saying they need about 30,000 people every month.
Wow. Jesus.
So I mean, on this particular aspect alone, I mean that makes no sense. I mean, especially to the extent that he's been claiming that a lot of hundreds of thousands of people are dying needlessly.
Look,
So he
I
doesn't
I
even
don't
need to come up with a new narrative. This is what he said during his campaign. The
I
human
don't
cost.
look. I don't think Donald Trump cares that much about human life. I mean, he was out here celebrating on Twitter about civilians being murdered in Yemen.
In
Israel is
Yemen,
going
yes,
on
I
a
saw
killing
that.
spree. He may say this stuff. I don't think he really care. I think Trump is amoral to the truth. He says whatever ever he has to
I
say. I
I
really
agree.
don't care what comes out of his
But what I'm
mouth.
what I'm keeping in mind is that whatever he's planning to do, and however he plans to go about it, trying to not rile some of his donors and some of those interests who are always kind of in the shadow behind it. Um, if that does not work, to the sense that we don't have a somewhat final resolution, not only just an end of hostilities, but a final resolution of the conflict by the end of the current year, I would say, by January 2026. Um, this is becoming
A
and if you
route.
add the tariff situation, yeah, this is becoming a liability, a political liability. It becomes his
Mhm.
own war.
Yeah.
Don't lose sight of that. It's so yes, we have the two-track approach, but you cannot, just delusion yourself to think that the Ukraine file is becoming secondary. It is front and center as far as this term is concerned. I mean, it is the key. You have to take a sword and split that Gordian knot. I mean, that's the only way to do it. It's going to rile some people, but you just have to engage in perception management to sell it. But at some point, the longer this whole thing goes on, it's being micro sabotage at every step of the way. Even the Russians now are, I mean, not at the top level you don't hear it, but some of the still senior officials occasionally muse out, their feelings, saying, right now there's nothing really substantial on this particular file. We are not seeing any progress, substantive progress. We don't even know what their proposal would be. There's no proposal of substance to negotiate. We
I
don't
would
know. It seems like they are tone deaf to our concerns.
just to interrupt real quick though, and I want to get over to another issue of Iran before I close it. If Putin really is seemingly going on an offensive, which it seems to be the case. I mean, the number of men, like you said, you were pointing out, they are pressing all across the front lines. Kursk is nearly over with at this point. They are literally in Sumy. If this is going to be an offensive and it's going to be a push, and Ukraine is already low manpower, I mean, this may be the crushing blow in a way where allows Trump to come in and force events. I'm not defending Trump on this. I agree with you. He should walk. I'm not, so don't misunderstand me on this. But these guys often have these kind of political machinations in their minds. And I don't know the conversation that Putin and Donald Trump had in actuality. I only know the readout of the conversation. For all I know, Trump was like, I don't care about this. What do you want? This is what I want. All right. We'll work this out. I have no idea. I have no idea.
No,
But if
I
they're,
don't think anybody knows. Nobody
yeah,
knows nothing. I mean, we know they had a 1.5 hour phone call. That's all we know.
yeah,
But we do not really have specifics on what
that phone
was
call.
exchanged. No.
All right. I need to move on.